That was lame. They're lame.
Yeah, I know. Where'd you get the money for this?
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs.
It's better when I do.
In 2013, The Last of Us was released for PlayStation 3. My dog died that year, I turned 21, and I froze to death because our house didn't have any insulation. Nothing to do but sit and play video games or write music in my bedroom between weekend D&D sessions. In that year I played Skullgirls, Final Fantasy XIV, Bioshock Infinite, and of course, the subject of this video, The Last of Us. I can't say that I liked every game that I played that year, but The Last of Us was obviously something special and set itself apart from its contemporaries. It took the design philosophy of making a video game into a movie and really expanded the horizons of an idea that most at the time were very against. But video games as a movie never really bothered me. I loved Metal Gear Solid 4, it's one of my favorite games of all time. But I don't think that it's really much of a competition when it comes to which game makes a better movie game. The Last of Us has a storyline and characters that will appeal to anyone. Try getting my 65-year-old mother into Metal Gear Solid 4.
Digital Devil Saga.
What I'm saying is that The Last of Us is prime material to create a TV show. The pieces were all there. The motion capture with professional AAA voice acting, the digital cinematography, the score, everything. Adapting The Last of Us from video game to film will likely be the easiest video game adaptation ever done, and that's a good thing. There have been so many video game adaptations to film that didn't work. I mean, remember Hitman?
His very existence is a sin. But others know he is a necessary evil.
Silent Hill? God, remember Resident Evil? Don't worry, we'll get to those some other time. Each one deserves its own video. But there's no way the writers of HBO's The Last of Us had as much difficulty adapting their video game counterparts to a storyboarded series as their friends working on something like Monster Hunter. But that still didn't keep me from expecting to see something immersion-breaking included just for a nod to the video game. But I was wrong. HBO's series has the most attention to detail I've ever seen out of a game adaptation. Where most adaptations have slight nods or references to the source material, The Last of Us adapts entire scenes to the screen. It's actually quite impressive. I've never quite seen anything like it. If this is the future of video game adaptations, then the future is bright. The show even adds some things that work rather well with existing scenes. Where The Last of Us the game sped through its opening to give control to the player, HBO's adaptation has the advantage of not having to worry about the player getting bored. For example, giving us more time to spend with Sarah is a great addition. In this series, Sarah feels more like a realized character. In the video game, we only get a single line from her that really gives you any insight into her personality.
Oh, ha.
Where did you get the money for this?
Drugs. I sell hardcore drugs. That one line alone was enough to make me like Sarah, but the show takes it one step further. The first third of the first episode is dedicated to developing Sarah and her father Joel's relationship. While she stumbles around the neighborhood, school, and downtown shops, strange happenings are afoot. Here, the writers decide to pull out every horror cliche in the book. We've got shops closing, dog knows something's wrong, the American education system, and scary out-of-focus background movement that the character doesn't notice. They obviously want you to know that something is wrong, and everything about these scenes sells it. This is definitely the best suspense I've ever seen out of a video game adaptation. The sets and effects are pretty good looking too. I get the feeling that a lot of practical effects were used to provide a realistic feeling. There were a few scenes that looked particularly obnoxious, like the green explosion while Sarah is sleeping, and another explosion a little later. But those were small distractions that only broke my immersion for a few seconds. I comment on them because they are the only effects where I thought to myself, well, that looks kind of bad. But in the same breath, only a few minutes later, I was impressed by what I believe to be practical effects in this scene where an infected woman stares down Sarah. In The Last of Us game and show, the world is taken over by a dangerous fungus that develops inside the body, spreading through spores that turn you into runner zombies. Our main character Joel survives the initial outbreak but loses his daughter Sarah in the events. Living in the quarantine zone many years later, Joel works as a smuggler and all-around ne'er-do-well. He and his business partner, Tess, accept a job to transport a girl, Ellie, who is about the same age as Joel's daughter when she died. Their mission is to transport Ellie out of the quarantine zone and to the local Capitol building, breaking curfew and risking their lives outside the protection of their home. I won't go into any more details unless you haven't played the game, but suffice it to say, Ellie and Joel go on an adventure to save the world. This isn't treading any new ground. Smuggler character transports the princess is a rather stale trope at this point, and The Last of Us isn't pretending otherwise. It isn't trying to reinvent the wheel, it's just attempting to create a good story within its spokes. And in the case of the game, I can certainly say that it succeeds. Joel is played by Pedro Pascal, who you may know as the Mandalorian. I personally had to be reminded that The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett were two different shows, so I can't say that I recognized him. But Pascal pulls off an impressive and inspired performance.
Come on. You come on. I know, baby. No, I know. Tommy, help me!
Ellie, our Dutagonist, is played by Bella Ramsey, who you might know as the little girl who stole the hearts of the public playing Lyanna Mormont in Game of Thrones, a strong but extremely young female leader. Next we have Anna Torv as Tess, who I believe performed rather well. I think I like her performance just as much as Pascal's, and Torv's makeup really does do a lot of work in this first episode. But really, it's her hardened emotional exterior that Torv pulls off so perfectly well. Then lastly, we have my favorite actress of the episode, Nico Parker as Sarah. Now, if you're coming from the Velma video, you might have already guessed that I'm not really bothered by the fact that Sarah has very quickly become a young mixed-race little lady. Sarah was a bit part in the Last of Us game, and her race was never a factor that affected how anyone in universe saw or treated her. Joel is racially recast as well, as Mr. Pedro is obviously not a white man. Yet again, I can't say that I'm bothered by it in the least. Their performances more than make up for the immersion break that comes from them not looking exactly like their video game counterparts. Nico really more than anyone. And for someone her age, her emotional range was extremely impressive. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for Mrs. Ramsey. Miss Ramsey? Mrs. Ramsey? She's a little lady. Probably not a Mrs., right? The portrayal of Ellie, who is arguably the most important character in the show, is unbelievable. The rough exterior that Ellie's character calls for implies a childhood full of hardship and suffering. Sure, she can be stern, but Ellie is a bad-mouthed brat, a street urchin.
And if I say no?
Do you even realize what your life means? Huh? Running off like that, putting yourself at risk? It's pretty goddamn stupid.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed with each other then.
What do you want from me?
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time.
Tommy knows this area.
Oh,
better
fuck
than...
that.
Well, I'm sorry. I trust him better than I trust myself.
Stop with the bullshit. What are you so afraid of? That I'm gonna end up like Sam? I can't get infected. I can take care of myself.
How many close calls have we had?
Well, we seem to be doing all right so far.
And now you'll be doing even better with Tommy.
Not her, you know.
What?
Maria told me about Sarah.
Ellie?
And
You are treading on some mighty thin ice here.
Having her portrayed by a girl who looks like the sweetest, most baby-faced girl in the world just doesn't quite sit right with me. I don't buy a single rude thing that comes out of her mouth. She's just too sweet-looking, and her performance can't get me past the girl from Game of Thrones part of her history. But where there are issues, there's always a silver lining. The recreation of the scenes from the game are absolutely fantastic. Shots are storyboarded in the same manner. Music cues play at the same time. Characters are wearing the same clothes. Shouts out to the guy who plays an infected that chases down Joel and Sarah in the opening, too. His job was just to run, and he makes it look so much fun. What they didn't adapt directly, they mostly improved. The scene where Joel and company are driving through the chaos of the initial reaction to the outbreak is much more chaotic than its video game counterpart. This is some next level stuff. Even Sarah's death sounds are almost identical to that of the video game.
You're okay. You're okay. Move your hand, baby. Move your hand.
Sarah. Move your hands, baby. I know, baby, I know. Listen to me, I know this hurts, baby. You're gonna be okay, baby. Stay with me.
There is an obvious love for the source material here that I don't think I've ever witnessed in any other property. The sets are also extremely believable. Nice attention to details with little bits of world building in the background that go a long way for something like this. I'm sure some of these places are actual locations they found to film in, but the recreation of the environments from the video game is accurate enough that I'm convinced that they built or dressed up a lot of this by hand. Even the music seems to be a somewhat loving recreation. From what I recall, the game used solo acoustic guitar tracks to a great emotional effect, and the show's composer must have noticed. There are 2 composers listed in the credits. One of them is the composer from the original game, and the other is a new composer brought in. Perhaps the music used in the first episode is just the video game music, I can't recall. There isn't much else to say, I just wanted to mention yet again that the love for the source material is extremely palpable. So that's pretty much it. This isn't as much of a full review as a first impressions video for a first episode. Sitting at an hour and 20 minutes long, I was on the edge of my seat, constantly impressed by the work that went into making the show. If it continues this trend, we might be seeing the best video game adaptation since the 1995 HBO's The Last of Us Episode 1 gets a 9 out of 10. Great. I don't doubt for a minute that something will ruin the show, but this is an undeniably good pilot. Comment and subscribe, tell me what you'd like to see me cover next, and I would like to thank our producers Anthony Wumbo, Biffman, John Foreman, and Zachary Coroner. Happy Lunar New Year and Kansas Day.